Okay, welcome to College with an exclamation point. The podcast. I'm Matt Carpenter. On today's episode, Peg and I discuss all the changes that have been happening, another week in crazy changes from the Department of Education. Specifically, we're going to hit on how they are proposing to tax endowments at colleges. We're largely in agreement with this, and we kind of talk through the pros and cons from what we're seeing so far. I think a less obvious benefit from us, but an interesting topic that we hit on second, proposed tax to colleges' intellectual property. The one that we're both firmly against, as you'll hear us expand upon, is the new ways that the, Department of Education wants colleges to calculate the cost of attendance at colleges. This is a little bit of a wild one, and again, we have some fun with that. And then the last thing we talk about are these proposed changes to the Pell Grant, the biggest grant for families with a lower income and less resources, and some things that, again, largely we are not in agreement with, but we will expand upon that. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Peg.
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
Vegas.
Yep. I'm in Vegas.
I
That's
saw
my
you.
background here.
You and Anne Marie went out to a fancy.
We did. I feel a little guilty, but we did. Actually, when we looked at the menu, it was kind of like, all right, if we get a steak, it costs this insane amount of money. If we pay a little more, we get their little fixed price thing. And it was like, that seems like a no-brainer, you know?
Did it deliver?
So.
Would you?
It was, oh my gosh. And it's what's fun about doing that is it's not stuff that I would normally order, but it was like Gordon Ramsay Steakhouse or whatever it was what it is. And I'm not a big foodie person. I mean, I've heard of the guy, but they just put all this fun stuff together and it's like, wow, this is so delicious.
Gals
And they
deserve.
just give you little tastes of it, but by the end the dessert was unbelievable and I couldn't finish it. I wish I had the rest right now.
Most importantly, how are the espresso martinis?
Actually, I got a vodka grapefruit drink instead because I was just pulled to it and it was actually quite good. It
All
was
right.
delightful.
Well,
Yes.
as long as you scratch that itch. All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm happy for you gals. So to the task at hand here, there's as always, another week, more things to discuss here in our ever-changing higher education climate. But let's start because we have some. I guess we've seen some of this stuff teased, but now we have some more information. But talk to us about this proposed tax to colleges' endowments, and what are some of the specifics that are potentially going to come to fruition?
Yeah. So just to tee it up, so the committee within the House has passed this, and now Johnson is going to bring it to the whole House. So then whatever that looks like will have to go to the Senate. So I just want everybody to understand this isn't like a done deal yet, but it did get through that small committee. So we talked about this on another podcast about this endowment tax. So currently endowments are taxed that have 500,000 or more per student. So they take the endowment, they divide it by the number of students. If it's over 500K, you have to pay this 1.4% endowment tax. So what they are proposing, and they've been talking about this and we talked about it before, is raising the tax. So the number that's in there is 21%. So almost 20x. It's a big increase from 1.4%. They're also pulling international students out. So the number of students is going to go down, which means more colleges are going to fall in the bucket of having to pay this when they do the math on it and divide it out, and they're paying over $500,000. So it's a massive increase in the tax. And then more colleges are going to be required to pay it if this goes through as there's a few other things to the colleges specifically that they have put through that they can pull, and this has already been talked about with Harvard. Trump's already come out with Harvard and saying, we want to pull your nonprofit status, but they're saying that they would be able to do that if a college is deemed, in quotes, supporter of terrorism, end quote, is exactly how they put it. And the government can accuse them. The college has to prove their innocence. The government doesn't have to prove it. So, in a court of law, innocent till proven guilty. It's not like that here. You're accusing you. You have to show us how you are innocent. So it's backwards there. And in the bill, the definition of terrorism is vague, which is huge, right? The Secretary of the Treasury has all the power to do this. That's the person that can say, hey, you're a supporter of terrorism, we're going to pull your nonprofit status. So the whole thing behind this is, when Israel was attacked and the whole war started in the Middle East, they want to make sure that Jewish students are safe, of course, and that other students still have their First Amendment rights. In this case, pro-Palestinian, but every student should have their First Amendment rights. So it's this balance here, and so that's where this has all come from. So it's the supporter of terrorism piece is a little scary. I mean, that needs to be very well defined. And the idea that, like, we're just accusing you and you're guilty until you show us why you're not is backwards. That's not the way we usually function in this country.
Yeah, so let me kind of comment on each of these, right? I see.
There's a couple others, but let's do these two first, I think.
Yeah, so the first one, I largely like and support, and I see some positive ramifications coming out of this. Right now, obviously, we know a lot of these colleges ultimately their business model operates like a very successful corporation, right? And in some cases, multi-billion-dollar corporations. The big difference is they don't pay taxes, so something seems a little bit arrive there again, especially when it's kind of so egregious in terms of just the top line, revenue and assets that they have without expanding their class size. So I don't know if this is intentional or not. Maybe we can give some credit and say they have some foresight here, but the one of our biggest problems and challenges with higher education is this kind of mindset of all these colleges bragging of how many students they deny each year, right? And and that just being such an important part of the, I don't know, it's aspirational, I think, for colleges to talk about and prove how many students they deny as their business continues to grow. That just seems ass backwards, right? It's like, what are we
Yeah.
talking about? So this will encourage them, because one way that this could be, if it comes to fruition, to say, hey, you better expand your classes, brother, right? If you want to keep your tax exempt status and you're right now have more than $500,000 of an of in your endowment per student that you let in, guess what? You better increase these class sizes, which it should be, and let's try to change this mantra around the more students you deny, the cooler you are, right? As a school, and again, and then maybe get rid of some of this nonsense of these schools that are so stinking hard to get into, that are sending these beautiful brochures to these school districts or to these students that they know are never going to get in, but it's going to encourage them to apply because I got this brochure from Princeton, Harvard, whatever it is, right? And damn, I better apply there. They love me. You had zero chance, but they get to say they deny you and pad their stats and blah, blah, blah. So I love this concept of, like, you want to keep your tax exempt status. Let's be more about what you should be about, which is getting more people to come to your school and providing great value, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I love that. The second one here, Peggy. Okay, you're gonna lose your tax exempt status if you support terrorism. That sounds fair to me, right? Like, that's normal thing to say. But how do we define this, to your point, right? The devil's in the details. Like, how do you, because that's quite a bold statement. And I've had I have some kind of strong opinions on how some of these encampments played out since October 7th and all this. I think I won't bore anyone with those opinions right now. But to accuse a school of just supporting terrorism is quite a friggin' strong statement. So again, how they define that is, I guess we'll see. But I'm kind of with you of, like, let's be careful here, guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real balance. I mean, college campuses, I read an article, this guy from Harvard last week, and he's like, college is supposed to be where you go and you sit down and you discuss and you disagree, and there's people from different walks of life. That's what college is. That's what college was when I went, and it's just, now it's just totally changing into something completely different, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, it's scary to me because it's putting all the power with the government and the Secretary of Treasury, which is basically the president. They're appointed by the president. So there could be people that are accused of stuff for reasons that maybe aren't even, there could be an abuse of power, and it sets up an ability to have an abuse of power that's pretty easy to see. So yeah, so we'll see. Again, all of these things, we just have to remember this committee passed it. It's got to go to the House. The Senate is probably gonna, if it gets to the Senate, it's gonna get pared down even more. So all these different things. So it's not a done deal by any means.
You would think. Let's talk about this next one, Peggy, because this is an interesting one too, in terms of things that, taxing these colleges is this concept of, taxing IP, intellectual property of colleges. But expand upon that a little bit and give us some of your thoughts.
Yeah, so what this was, the other two pieces here were the endowment tax on the investment income of their private intellectual property. So, for example, patents, copyrights, that could be taxable, which right now it is not. Also, what they're calling unrelated business income could be taxable, and that's like logos, just their name. And the one article, when doing my research, called out UNC Chapel Hill and said, what they make off of that unrelated business income, that, at least what they say, is that goes towards student scholarships. So if that's taxed, there's less money to go to student scholarships. So that's the reason why we're talking about all this, and I don't disagree with you about the endowment. I think 1.4% is a pretty low tax rate, and some of these colleges are sitting, they're sitting on billions and billions of dollars. It's huge. I think they, as Warren Buffett says, everybody's got to pay their share. All these pieces, you just have to see how it plays out. And it could hurt students. And you think, well, who cares if you tax them on their name and their logo and the money they're making? It just depends on that school and what they use those funds for. And it's just creating an environment that could get more and more expensive for families. Like free money that's out there now could go bye-bye.
Yeah, this
We
is an
just don't
interesting
know.
one to me. This is an interesting one to me. I'm excited to learn more. First of all, Peggy, is there anyone you want to say hi to in Chapel Hill? Speaking of Chapel Hill.
Oh, I want to say hi to my mother. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. So, again, well, just like all this stuff, we'll have to see exactly, how they're defining some of this. But what it reminds me of is a little bit of the, these recent rule changes around the NIL for NCAA athletes, right? Name, image, likeness. For the longest time, there was this kind of controversy that should these student athletes, these college athletes, be compensated for the billions of dollars they're creating in revenue, right? With the ticket sales and the, t-shirts and TV deals, I guess most importantly. And this is relatively new, right? 2-3 years old, where now, students, and I think rightly student athletes should be able to be compensated, again, specifically for all the revenue that they generate at their colleges and for the NCAA at large. And I think there might be some comps here again where I'm like, okay, because again, these colleges do have the intellectual property, and some of it is their logos and whatever, and and that's just a whole nother huge revenue stream again for their should some of that stuff again be able to be taxed. I don't have a clear answer to that, right? And to your point, let's just say UNC Chapel Hill does in fact use all the revenue that they generate from that and just dump it right back into financial aid to make the school more affordable for more families. Well, certainly we don't want to get in the way of that. But is that how every college does it? And should there be some guardrails around, hey, if you are generating all this revenue through other things aside from, just tuition and what we think of as being the, lifeblood of these colleges, if you don't put X amount back into investing in your students and making college more affordable and creating opportunities after graduation, should some of that be taxed? That's an interesting concept to me. So again, we'll have to see what comes out, but I'm open to the idea that there could be something there, right?
I think ultimately there's going to be more taxes to the colleges. Whatever form ends up coming through and whatever percentages, we'll see. But if I were a college, I'd be sitting there thinking some of this is going to make it through, and they should assume that's going to happen.
Yeah. So Peggy, this next one here that I want you to touch on, we both have some comments on. We were trying to read up on exactly what this means and these proposed changes around how colleges need to calculate cost of attendance. We were scratching our heads, and I still don't know that we fully understand it. Speaking for myself, I don't think I do. And guess what? that doesn't bode well, because if you and I, that have been experts in the space for a long time, can't really figure this out, I'm a little bit nervous about, students, parents, etc., being able to have some clarity here. But talk a little bit about these proposed changes around cost of attendance.
Yeah, so again, just for everybody, cost of attendance is the full enchilada, tuition, fees, room and board, books, travel. That's the total cost that colleges will say, you want to come here for a year, it's 36,000, it's 97,000. It'll be a little different depending on travel and different things for each student, but for most kids, it's pretty much in the ballpark. So what the government is coming out and saying, and it's trying to make colleges more accountable, which is what we talked about last time, is saying that they've created this concept of what they're calling a median cost of college. And so what they're asking them to do is report cost of attendance estimates to the federal government and break it down by program. So that means like the nursing program, the business program, and to your point, I don't know, like how detailed. Is it marketing versus supply chain as a major? I mean, because business is massive, right? There's different, you go into investment banking, that's different than going into marketing. So how detailed they are in this, I don't know. But when I first read this, I just had to sit back, and just because of what we do, it's like, what? So you're going to have like hundreds of these median costs of college for each college, thousands? Like, how is this ever, how are colleges even going to do it? They have to go and do it. That's a massive undertaking. And then it gets reported to the government. And then how do they put on their website how much they cost? I mean, like, this just seems, forget about if it's a good idea or not, but just to do it seems almost absurd. Like, it just, these are politicians that are coming up with this stuff, and they might have decent reasons why they're doing it, but it's like they need to have somebody come in who's in the space to say, is this even something that could even happen? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, if it goes anywhere, because it just, I don't know how you would do it. I don't know how you would break down all these majors and have a median cost of college. And then think about what this is going to do to parents and kids. Like, it's already so opaque and so transparent. That's why we even have a podcast and a company. And now we're going to tell them that now there's hundreds of moving pieces of costs at colleges.
Yeah, we had this very similar kind of visceral reaction of like, okay, like again, there's best intentions here of like, hey, not all costs for college are created equal, and let's make sure that we have colleges explain that and families understand it, right? That we can all get behind that concept. But in terms of the how it's being proposed we do that, it's going to be a fucking shit show if this ever goes through, right? And
Yeah.
one of the biggest reasons families, so many families, too many families have a negative end result when it comes to ROI and it comes to the financial piece of this puzzle is the inherent lack of transparency and confusion and just like, what the hell's going on in this process? And let me just, I don't know, somehow get this thing across the finish line, because I can't even like, take the time to figure out how to make this work from an affordability standpoint, because it's too stinking complicated, right? Let me a kid just get accepted, and then let's figure it out, right? Famous last words here. So again, we're looking at this going, there is no way that this proposed recommendation does not create more confusion, right?
Oh, yeah,
And
100%. Yeah.
and we need to go in the opposite direction there, because when we have confusion, it's like it doesn't matter how good the intentions are, and it'll, we just know, right? We've flown too many missions to know how families will react, and they'll just again be like, this is too much, paralysis by analysis, and I'm just gonna like kind of back away, and it happens, right?
Yeah. And for colleges to actually do this is going to create, they need labor to do it. There's going to be a big cost to do it. And then if they have to do this, where's that money going to come from? They're already strapped, and then that could be pulled from potential merit scholarship buckets. Who knows? Like, I'm just making that up, but I'm just thinking that too as I'm listening to you. They have to do it. This is a whole big thing that they have to do that's going to require funds and staff, and then you have to keep it up to date. I mean, it's a Herculean, is that, am I saying it right? Task. Yeah.
Herculean task there. That's a
Yes, yes. I mean, it's massive. It's crazy.
And Peggy, I was doing some math in my head too, being like, are all these different talk about what do we say is one of the most confusing things is getting your financial aid award letter. How confusing is that's going to be? Now each college has 10 different, way more, dozens of different ways that they present their financial aid award letters. So again, the downstream impacts when we get granular on how that concept will actually play out, right, as far as we're concerned, it's like,
I
nope,
mean,
that might.
I don't see how this ever plays out in any way. I mean, I get the spirit behind it. It's funny, they're trying to make things more transparent, but this is actually, if you look at the end consumer that's purchasing this education, it's going to make it so much harder for them to navigate it. And then forget about if you have it all planned out that this is the cost for this, and then what does your kid do? Because tons of kids do. They change what they're studying in the middle. So then that change. I mean, everything changes again. It's just it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yep. Not
At
agreed.
least what I've read high level about this one so far.
That's right. Unless we're missing something based on the information that's out there, because again, we both had the same what's going on here. All right, Peggy, and then just talk to us a little bit about again, and I think we both talked about this in a couple different places, and information again is still coming out like a lot of these things, but some of these Pell changes, and specifically,
Yeah, they kind of came out with something slightly different than what we were talking about the last time. And this one kind of blows me away is that they're to be 100% get a full Pell, a student will have to have 15 credit hours per semester. So if you're a new parent, your kids haven't gone to school yet, like it's pretty common. Like that's you, Matt, right? When my kids first went, I was like, take 12 hours the first semester. That's like 4 classes. You're getting used to college. You can still graduate in 4 years. Just get used to college. So basically, they can't do that. They're taking 3 5 3 hour classes or however it breaks down. That's a lot. That's a lot that was my first thought, like from a parent side. Wow, that's a lot for a kid to have to take on each first semester freshman year. And if you don't do this throughout, you're not full Pell eligible. So a lot of these kids that are full Pell eligible, they're not going to be, right? So they had talked about 12 credit hours were out there before, which to me makes a lot more sense. So they upped it. So that's like 5 classes. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's not a lot throughout your whole college career, but right at the beginning, I think it's a lot. As I'm reading the Republicans' mindset around this, it's just if kids aren't in school full time, they're less likely to finish. I'd have to go and do a bunch of research on that to see if that's actually accurate and what the numbers tell us and the data behind that. But I think that's the spirit behind it, that be in school for real and then you get your full Pell, but 12 hours is considered full-time student. So I don't really get bumping it to 15 hours. I think that's really punitive.
and let me add something else in there of who's going to be who would really feel the brunt of this. Now, if you have kind of any type of learning disability or you're on an IEP, could be ADHD, dyslexia, any number of things, right? Obviously, that's a huge laundry list. But in working with a lot of professionals that focus, in that space, when it comes to these students making the transition to college, universally, almost the first recommendation is, guys, you can't take more than 12 hours or 12 credits per semester. You can't take, because again, you're going to have an adjustment. And in most cases, you're not going to have the same resources that you've been used to, so far, right? Through 12th grade. So to make that manageable, you have to, kind of work up to taking that, 15 credit. So again, that's kind of immediately where my head went to of like, okay, so here's who's going to be really negatively impacted by the full Pell, are the families that have, are Pell eligible, which means they don't have a lot of resources, right? Lower income, little to no savings. Have a student that's on some type of IEP, struggles with some type of disability. This is who's going to be punished, right? Under this premise here. So that's,
Well, yeah, and the other group that's going to be punished are these, there's Pell kids that are right out of high school, but then there's a lot of Pell eligible. They're like 25, 26. They might even have kids. They're working and they want to make a better life for themselves, so they're going to college at night or whatever, community college, and they're eligible for Pell. Well, they can't just quit their job and have a full load for 15 hours. So And that's a huge chunk. Like, it was interesting when I was doing some research, not this morning, but a couple days ago, and it caught my eye because they were talking about Ivy Tech Community College, which is in Indiana, which my son went to IU, and he actually took a class in the summer there just to stay on track for 4 years. And they basically said with these new rules, they had 33,000 students that would be affected. They think there's going to be a $19 million loss of financial aid. 70% of their kids attend part time. The average age is 27, and they think, it's a $7,000 loss across all of them. So it's also hitting that group. Like, that's a really good point about kids that have learning differences and how they can't take 15 hours. But then there's, people that are working while they're getting their education and they can't take 15 hours. So you're basically, and I would argue somebody like that, that's a parent that is driven, that just because they're part-time, I don't agree with the Republicans, like, you're not going to finish. That person's really going to finish. They've got kids. They have a real reason and a goal they're trying to reach. And now, boom, that's a lot of money to take away from somebody like that. It basically means I don't do it and forget about school, or now I'm trying to get money elsewhere, and in the private market you might not even be able to get a loan because of their income level. So it's a real game changer, life changer.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more here, right? And I think, and this is where I think we have some good solutions in our position paper around this, because my head went exactly where your head went. Now, again, I understand the spirit, and I think there is. I don't want to say I did a deep dive, but I did take a look at some of what the data behind the rationale, which is like, hey, these kids that are going to community college part time usually don't graduate, or they have much lower graduation rates than students that go full time, and so that's a waste of an investment in federal government money if we give this money and they never graduate, right? Understood. But to your point, there is absolutely a percentage of the population is they're going part-time because they have to. And there's a few individuals that I thought of. And if you remember this young lady from a couple of years ago that we gave the CAP scholarship to, do you remember that video? Like, Emma was in it.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, I do.
Awesome video. We gave her, I think, a $2,000 scholarship. Maybe it was even 1,000 or 1,500. You would have thought we gave them $1 billion, right? The way that this young woman
Yeah,
reacted.
it was a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, right? And I thought of her because we ended up having a nice little have a nice little bond, but she can't, first generation immigrant, right? No money. Her parents didn't have any money. She had worked as long as she could work, she had worked full time in addition to going to school to literally help pay the bills, right? For her family. She couldn't go to school full time, right? And she had to go part time because it's still kind of the same deal, right? She still has like responsibilities in her household just because that's their reality, right?
Yep.
But she works her ass off. She's killing it at college, just like she killed it in high school. And it's very likely that college would not be possible for her if this went through, right? And she
Right.
didn't,
I know.
right? And so
It's
it's like,
really, it's heartbreaking. It
it
really
really,
is.
like
Yeah.
like like I look at that and I'm like, what the fuck are we doing, guys? Right?
I
Because that's
know.
obviously one individual, but that we're talking about a meaningful percentage of the population, and this is the percentage of the population that we want to help and lift up and get to improve their family's life the way that they freaking earned. Which
Yeah.
gets back to what our position paper recommends here is, okay, and as a potential solution to this problem, to kind of, I think, maybe thread the needle with what they're trying to accomplish here, is make it merit based. Say, okay, you can have this Pell Grant even if you're going part time, but guess what? You got to show up to class. You got to maintain at least a minimum GPA, and again, we'll make it attainable 2.0 or whatever. And if you don't do that, then we're not going to invest in you because you're not holding up your end of the bargain. But if you're
Yeah.
going,
It's a two-way street. Yeah. It's a two-way street. Yeah.
so again, I think introducing some merit into some of these programs to again create that accountability, that word we are always coming back to for all stakeholders and parties involved, I think is a solution there. But to just say like, forget about this percentage of the population.
Yeah, I just think there needs to be a deeper dive into accountability in general. The colleges are accountable, the students are accountable, the parents are accountable, everybody's accountable. And what's the best way to do that? And I'm not saying analyze it for 3 decades, but look at it, bring in the good thought leaders in this space and tap some of them, meaning Congress should be doing this, and then forming.
Just roll out our position. We did
We're
your
available. We're available.
did your homework for you guys. Freaking do this, and there's a solution. Everybody wins. Again, is it perfect? I don't know. Probably not. But there's actual solutions in there, and again, it speaks specifically to this challenge that just like make a ton of sense to me, right? Like, yes,
Yeah.
we should help those students, but those students have an obligation if they're going to get an investment, right?
Yeah. Just like kids have an obligation to their parents to work hard. Their parents are paying part of the bill. They should be accountable. I mean, that's a parenting thing, but they should be accountable. If the kids are fooling around, I'm not going to pay anymore. Same thing on the
No
parent.
partying.
No, play hard. I was always like, play hard, study hard, but you got to do both. That was my deal when I was in school. I did both.
As you should, and that's part of the experience that you've earned of being at college, right? And that's an important part. All right, Peggy. I think that's it. Anything else? Anything else you want to leave?
No, just the overarching reason for a lot of this. I know they're talking about accountability a lot, but as I said podcasts ago, they're trying to pass through and find over $1 trillion, right? So that they can continue tax cuts. So that's a big part of why the Republicans are looking to do a lot of this stuff. So as all of us as Americans, you should look into why your representatives are doing what they're doing, and does it benefit you? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So that's just something to always keep in mind.
100%. All right, Peggy, my dear, appreciate your time. Enjoy Vegas, baby.
Yeah,
Make some money for me in addition to spreading the love and the education to all the school counselors out there.
Yeah, all of our school counselors and IECs that we're hanging out with today. So yeah.
Have some fun.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so thank you for joining us on today's College, the podcast. If you like what you hear, please share us. Please actually follow us on the feed. That's how we get noticed a little bit. So if you're getting any benefit, please do that on wherever you listen to your podcast. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Matt Carpenter, and Peg Keough, our Director of Education here at College Aid Pro, and the producer was Eileen Campbell. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.